Welcome back to Unscripted from my studios here in Columbus, Ohio. This is going to be a very interesting episode today. It is. I don't know that the content will be for everyone, but I think it's so important. So can you introduce yourself, my guest, Noel? Can you introduce yourself and we'll go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm NOEL Thomas. I'm the founder and CEO of Darkwatch, and we're here to identify the organized crime and sophisticated trafficking that's occurring here in the United States and abroad.
This is a topic that it's so interesting, man. When I got the opportunity, this is a topic that I think a lot of people don't want to admit exists, or they think it's a conspiracy theory, or maybe they're not aware of it. That's why I'm so glad you're here. You have been immersed in this. And so I really want to hear from you today, about, man, your experiences. And I know this very experience started very early for you, correct?
Oh, that's exactly right. So, I say that this passion for fighting human trafficking started as a child. Our family is walking in this indoor market. My dad gets distracted by this lady, and my 4-year-old sister at the time, he looks down and sees that she's gone. And so thankfully, he trusts his instincts. He runs towards the exit of this building where a man we didn't know was walking out the door with my sister. And my dad recovered my sister at the very last second. The man runs off. But this leaves a deep impression on me as a child. And I think connected to a lot of other events that I saw that led to this passion of fighting human trafficking.
So I have to tell you this story. There's a amusement park here in Ohio is where I'm based. So it's called Kings Island. And years and years and years ago, we were there. My little blonde daughter with her little ponytails went to get ice cream with my wife. She was our happy wanderer. And so at some point she wandered away while my wife was in line to get ice cream. My son and I were in line for another ride. And this is back when you had flip phones. And so I got this little flip phone text that said, Emma's gone. And I'm like, what? Like, what are you talking about here? Like, where are we at? We're at an amusement park. And years earlier, and I promise you there's a point to the story. Years earlier, a friend of mine had told me that at this particular amusement park, people would grab kids, take them into the bathroom, change their clothes so you couldn't recognize their shoes or outfits, and then walk them out the door of this amusement park. So, man, my head is spinning. I'm so scared for my little girl because I don't know where she's at. And so my son and I start running all over the park. The short story long, we found her. A family had recognized that this little blonde girl was just walking through this park alone, literally, and they kept the eyes on her. And what they told me was when they went up to her, they said, "Hey, are you okay?" And she said, "I'm just waiting for my dad to get ice cream. I'm trying to get choked up, man." Like, but that story's not the same for everyone. I just wanted to share that just to give some perspective of, man, in those moments, no, I'll never forget that. I could have lost my little girl. My little girl's walking around an amusement park. And there are people that are preying on her. So I just want to kind of set a stage for where my head is and why it's so important that we talk about this.
Man, I mean, that's exactly right. It's like, when it happens to someone that we love and care about, there's nothing that we wouldn't do to protect them and keep them safe. My sister is one of my best friends, and it's cool because it kind of eventually came full circle where we were playing in a rock and roll band, traveling the world together, and actually used that platform to raise awareness. So we kind of turned that hard story into a positive, and that really did drive the fuel to build this apparatus. I mean, our team is some of the best in the country in AI, national security experts. And the way that we go after and bring these tools is just unparalleled. And that's where we saw the opportunity is we need innovation and we need technology and we need people that are angry and going to the front lines and saying, here I am, send me into this mission. So
all right, so we're going to talk about the book because you have two things. You have the company, which is Dark Watch, and you have Dark Traffic, which is the book. So let's
Right.
start with the book, or which one do you want to start with? Do you want to talk about the company or the book, or
Yeah, let's
the
start.
chicken or the egg? Which one came
Let's start with
first?
let's start with the book. That sounds great.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's talk about the book. You have put everything out there that you and I are going to talk about today. Let's just talk about the book, where people can get it, and what they're going to learn.
Yeah, so it's available Amazon, Barnes and Noble, pretty much anywhere that books are sold. And I say that this is a field guide to becoming a modern day abolitionist. It's a really deep look at sophisticated organized crime and human trafficking through the lens of an entertaining story of this kind of winding path of starting in rock and roll and ending up in this crazy passion of fighting human trafficking. And so the immediate thing that a reader will take away from this book is that human trafficking is oftentimes operating in our backyard. It affects those we love and care about, and even now it's starting to get into our homes through social media and the risks online in online gaming. And so I think that will be really illuminating, is just how close this problem is. And the other part of the book is how sophisticated these groups are and how they operate. And so I think those are going to be two kind of major takeaways, and then break down this idea that really anyone can raise their hand, a guy in rock and roll or whatever, is you can use your skills, your platform, to be a voice and a channel for this movement of ending modern day slavery.
And when you say modern day slavery, like that's our kids. You know, I mean, slavery is a word that I think has some, connotations to it. But we're talking about children, right?
That's exactly right. And it's there's there's connotations that we have of slavery, and that's true. And I think that's absolutely true, that there's still these abuse and violences and things that we just wouldn't even imagine that are going on in the sex trade, the labor trade, and the organ trade, which we go really deeply into. Is that there are some really horrific elements behind this, and that's why it's pulled the moniker modern day slavery, human trafficking, and these iterations of it, and we go really deep into that in the book.
So, but at the same time, you also go into redemption in the book. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. I mean, we have to have a hope that keeps us going. There's a reason why we do this, is that we believe that there is a light. I talk very deeply about my faith and how that faith was a driving factor for this. But yes, there has to be hope at the end of this story.
There's a lot of numbers that are thrown out about trafficking. And again, I think most of us in our daily lives, unless it was my child at that amusement park, we don't, and again, she was not trafficked. Let me be clear. Like, but at the same time, I lost her
Right.
for a few moments. And in that moment, I was scared to death. And I can't imagine the parents or the people that lost a child or don't know where their child is and are
Mhm.
scared to death. Those statistics are out there, but I
Mhm.
think we blow right by them. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I don't want to speak for everyone. I'm just saying, I think this is so important. I live in a city that has an event every year. I won't mention the event. I don't want to, put anybody on blast, but there's an event. And what I have heard is it's a Super Bowl for trafficking.
Mhm.
That makes me sick.
Mhm.
It makes me sick because my daughters actually competed in that. They went to that event.
Mhm.
One of them in gymnastics, for example. And I
Mhm.
remember my wife talking about. And I'm sorry if anybody's listening today and this is triggering. I don't want to be, but let's just be really honest. My daughter was a gymnast, and so she's in a little gymnastics outfit. And I remember my daughter saying, or my wife saying, I took her there, and it just, she felt something. And again, I'm not going to mention the event. I'm just saying this stuff happens, man. We have to be aware of this, right?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, and that's the thing is, we actually map out where these human trafficking hotspots are occurring, and it will be 1 mile from our place of worship, 1 mile from our school, right around the corner from our house. And it's not just in these these areas that you think, these kind of depressed areas. This is happening in high-end neighborhoods. This is happening all over the United States, and very, very close. The more that we look and the more that we know, you start to see it kind of more often, and realize, at least in my case, that we have to do something about this. We can't just idly sit by and allow this to happen in our backyard, and to put our future generations at risk for this type of activity.
So let me ask you, how does a child go missing in the United States, let's say, right?
Mm.
How does a child go missing and this not become national news? Because we do hear about a child every now and then that was this or that, right? It's on news. But if these numbers are correct, these children are going missing all the time. How does that happen?
Yeah, there's a lot of variety of factors in which the traffickers are luring them. So they say that the basis for human trafficking is force, fraud, and coercion. And these traffickers have 12 different tactics in which they'll bring someone into trafficking. So on one end, it might be a love interest where they actually appear to be a boyfriend, and there's a romantic connection that's built. These types of trauma bonds with the trafficker and these love bonds are some of the hardest cases of trafficking to break, because they're not using force or kidnapping in the way that we traditionally think. And so, someone that has fallen in love with their trafficker, it is very difficult to get them out of human trafficking. So that's one example of a tactic, all the way to the other side where it is force, and they're using hardcore drugs to get them hooked and under their control. And there's a whole spectrum in between of how this is operating. Now they're looking specifically for, when it comes to child trafficking, children that are falling through the cracks. And so those are ones that are runaways, maybe don't have good home lives, maybe have been in the foster system, but where there isn't going to be a lot of people actively looking, like you are as a concerned parent for your child, right? And that's, they're going for the lowest hanging fruit, because they don't want to be seen. They want to be able to operate without drawing a lot of heat on them, and so those are the types of profiles that they're looking for. That's not certainly exhaustive. I mean, we've heard stories of girls being on a volleyball team, and you mentioned gymnastics, but being on a volleyball team, actively going to school, and their parents not even noticing that they were being trafficked while still in school and while still living at their parents' house. So it can take on a lot of different shapes, and I think, as parents and as a community, we have to be aware of these tactics of traffickers so that we can be guarding this next generation.
So you have the book, which is Dark Traffic. You also have Dark Watch, which is your company. And I think you have used the technology of, now we have AI. There's a lot of technology. So because I think you just mentioned it, like, we might not even know that our child is being trafficked because of the internet right now.
Right.
And so parents have to put safeguards in place. And that's, again, that's a whole, probably another conversation. But what does Dark Watch do in term? And I don't know how much you can get into that, because there's a lot of things we probably can't talk about because what you guys are involved in. But at the end of the day, the book and what you're doing, you're on the front lines. So I'm trying to kind of dig into, just make awareness for parents. What are you all doing online? Because that's a big deal.
Yeah, we pull a lot of illicit activity that's occurring on the internet and compile it and place AI to analyze it and analytics, so we can look at hotspots, let's say in the United States, of where to focus the efforts or where the training or action needs to go. Those maps have been highly effective in showing the problem in the backyard. We use these maps all the time to show the extent of this problem. And so that's kind of one of our public facing tools that we've got. We've got a lot of capability behind the hood, if so to speak, with guys that are ex law enforcement or have fought in the war on terror, that really help us put together a special set of tools for for this. But the other thing is really a basic approach for parents. And every parent that we talk to, we say, hey, it really starts with the conversation
Mm,
with your child.
mhm.
There's going to be extended periods of time that they're with their friends, they're at school, and we need to create a safe environment where your child feels comfortable talking about the risk, or things that they might see that make them feel uncomfortable. So we're seeing in this the sextortion trend, which is a real epidemic here in the United States, is that these poor kids have, now shared intimate photos of themselves, and on the other side they thought it was a love interest. It's hardcore organized crime that's saying, hey, now that you've shared your photo, give us $500, or we
Mm.
release this to all your friends, or we know where your family lives. And so you could think a 13, 14-year-old child is really traumatized and kind of maybe full of shame in this moment. And that's where the parents need to have this safe environment where the kid can come forward, because the parents are going to be first line of defense. And, I think the first natural reaction with so many parents that we talk to is they're upset that their child is sharing these images.
Sure.
But in reality, we help the parents understand your child is actually a victim of a crime, and we need to treat the situation in that way. And so those are some of the tactics that are less technological, but are just equally as important, is equipping parents with these communication skills to be able to have this conversation with their kids.
So before we go any further, what are the links where people can find the book, you, all of everything you're doing? Because this is really important. This is so important. Where can they find the links?
Yeah, so they can go to darkwatch.io to find more about the company and the type of work that we do. And they can go to Amazon, searching for Dark Traffic, and they'll be able to find it, or Barnes and Noble. They'll be able to find it as well there.
So this is going to be, I promise you, there's two questions. One's going to be hard. The other one might be really cool. The first question is, in all of you have actually been there when you went and rescued someone, right?
Mhm.
So what is the hardest thing you've seen? This is going to be a dark question. It might be hard for people to listen to, but what is what's the worst day in what you've
Yeah.
seen?
So I think that a lot of the most gruesome stuff is going to be involved in the organ trade, and the victims of that, and that's the kind of stuff that will keep you up at night. But you did mention the raid that I went out on, and I think the hardest thing is that when we got to this hotel that we were doing this knockdown, the front desk had tipped off the trafficker that this raid was about to happen. And so we got to the room, and you could see the trafficker's jacket, his hat, his shoes. He had just left. And there's, a girl cowering in the corner. And it's like, okay, I'm seeing a victim on a raid for the first. I've talked to plenty of survivors, but seeing them, actively being trafficked, and right there was one of those moments that was really transformative. And this girl just really wanted to be reunited with her family. And so that's what law enforcement did in that scenario, was help reunite her with her family. And unfortunately, I think the sad part is that the trafficker got away. So um, it's kind of a double edge on this. And I think when you see that, it humanizes, like, hey, this really could be someone I care about and love, as you and I have both nearly experienced,
Right.
the
Right.
panic around that, right? And when you make that connection, it's kind of like, hey, the work that we're doing at Dark Watch, or with the book, is really fighting for our brothers and sisters that are trapped and ensnared in here, and giving them a voice, and giving tools to, be part of one of the greatest rescue missions in history.
And I want to put a pin in that because I want to come back to something you mentioned in that in a second. So tell me, that was your worst day. What's your best day?
I think the best day is knowing that our information is leading to an arrest, or a deep investigation of guys that had been undetected for a long time. That's usually the best day. I say that, you know the other thing that I really enjoy is getting to work alongside guys like Tim Tebow and
I was going to ask you that. Yes.
others that are on the front line driving innovation and really care about this particular issue. There's a subset of companies like Darkwatch that are bringing all sorts of really cool technology to market, to help assist with this problem. And I think last week I was with a bunch of them, and just seeing how these technologies are being used is really inspiring and provides a lot of hope, that there are people that are moving the needle in the right direction here.
Well, I believe Angel Studios. I was going to ask you that. Tim Tebow. There are high influence people, thank God,
Mhm.
that are finally really calling this thing out, so we can be aware. And thank you for your book and your efforts and all those things. You mentioned the hotel tipped him off, the predator.
Right.
I don't know if I'm using the right language, but the individual that did this, you
Hmm.
were able to, thank God, save that young lady in that hotel room. But you mentioned the hotel tipped him off. So there's a bigger system that I think people really need to understand. This isn't just walking up and grabbing a kid at the park. There's a lot more happening here. Is that true?
That's exactly right. I mean, the story with my sister is such the minority of how trafficking occurs. This is big business. It's more lucrative. It's becoming more lucrative than the drug trade, because you can sell that drug or that weapon one time. You can sell a victim of trafficking up to 20 times per day. And there's not as many people looking for these victims of trafficking as they are drugs and weapons. And so this becomes highly lucrative. They're saying that human trafficking might become the largest illicit trade in the world, overtaking drugs. And that is the thing, is realizing just how deep the breadth of these operations are, and how much money is at stake.
My gosh, I'm literally like physically feeling what you just said, because to your point, if I give you a pill or a
Mhm.
that's a one timer.
Right.
I can't even face that sentence, man. I don't know how you did. This is such a difficult and dark topic, but you all are doing things to bring light to it.
That's
You
right.
really, really are. Let me ask you a few more questions. Do you feel like the current administration, I don't want to get political, I don't,
Mhm.
but do you feel like the current administration as of January is more supportive or not? And if you choose to say pass, then that's fine too. But do you feel like the current administration really wants to get this fixed?
I'll say this, so human trafficking is one of those issues that should unite both sides of the aisle, because we can all say that human trafficking is
Strong.
bad, is
Right.
wrong, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so I think that there's an opportunity to bring unity here between the parties around this issue, particularly. I'll say that there's been some really incredible movement over the last few weeks. One in particular, and that is that these sex trafficking groups that have come from other parts of the world are now being labeled as terror organizations,
100%.
which means that the full weight of the Department of Defense and these other agencies that fight terrorists like ISIS and Al Qaeda are now pivoting their apparatus to people whose business is sex trafficking. And so it's a really interesting time to see this convergence of counter-terror and counter-sex trafficking, and those teams starting to come together. That's what we've wanted to see for a long time, is like, how do we use more sophisticated tools? Because slavery has only been going up, and human trafficking has only been going up. And to really combat this at scale, you need the full weight of the government. You need the full weight of technology and defense contractors that are bringing some really cool and experimental stuff to the front lines of this fight. And so I think that's what makes this time particularly exciting. There's a lot of talk on both sides of the aisle of uh, how there's going to be a deeper approach
Good.
to pushing these bad elements out of our communities and out of our backyards. And I think people are seeing this, right?
Sure.
when you have these criminal groups that are taking over an
Apartment
entire
complexes, right?
apartment
Right,
complex, right?
right.
Or
Hmm.
there's violent crime that's happening in Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket by these guys, right? It's now, okay, we're all feeling the effects of this, and we all have to be, regardless of our political affiliation, all working together to push this out of our communities.
Yeah, and I think for someone like yourself, you've focused on it when it was over there, and that could be one side of the state, but now it's here. And I
Right.
think, to your point, I think people like yourself, your book, your website, your technology, Tim Tebow, Angel Studios, like so many people now are turning that spotlight to, hey, it's not just over there anymore, it's here. And so we have to be aware. And the more we can be aware, the better we all will be. And hopefully we can save some more children or adults. And so have you seen adults be trafficked as well?
100%. Yeah. So it's easy to see the child trafficking because, it's everyone's looking for it. And so there's actually a lot of resources to go after children that are being trafficked, and law enforcement has the ability to pivot very quickly to get a child out of trafficking when they're aware of it. But it's those that are over 18 that the criminals know, hey, it's hard to distinguish between someone that might be willfully in sex work and a person that's being sex trafficked. And these groups know that. So they're actually moving away from child trafficking because it draws so much heat, and moving to these populations that fall through the cracks that no one is really looking for. And that's kind of the next frontier here in the counter trafficking movement is how do we get those that are over 18. When I did that raid, the challenge was is that girl had turned 18 like a week before we got there.
Mm.
So there's all of these aftercare and rehabilitation programs for children, but the moment you turn 18, there's even less resources for them. And so really the best solution was to reunite her with her family where she wanted to go. But I mean, in an ideal world, there would be some job skill training, and there would be some therapy and other tools to help her reintegrate back into society. And so that's where you start to see these nuances between under 18 and over 18 start to develop, and the opportunities are really there for the adults that are being trafficked that really no one is looking intensely for.
And there are places. So Tim Tebow has partnered with our church. There's a home here in, I'll just say Ohio. There's a home because we have to be very careful here, right? But there is a house that has been renovated that for young ladies, not children, but to your point, 18 and over, that are trying to get jobs. But that even then, to go through that, those that have been trafficked have to feel comfortable. They have to feel safe because for years they have not. I mean, it's anyway. That's just a whole nother topic. This is such an important topic, man. And I'm so thankful that we could have this time today to talk through that. I do want to ask you, because it is in the spotlight, and maybe it's a God thing that this is in the spotlight. Everybody wants to know two things: the Epstein list and the P. Diddy list. Because, sprinkled in there somewhere is the topic of trafficking. Um, I don't even know what to ask you in that. I just know that those lists exist, and there's probably a lot of very powerful people, but there's also a lot of victims. And so can you just talk about these? Let's just talk about what these two lists that are out there. That's just that's just scratching the surface. That's just two that got caught, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, you're seeing that the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch was sued for sex trafficking. You're starting to see these executives of corporations. You're seeing litigation that's coming out of this. Certain banks were sued for hundreds of millions of dollars for banking with Epstein. And I think that what we're going to see is that human trafficking touches all areas of society: hospitality, transportation, banking and finance, in all these areas. And I think that it's lived and thrived hidden underground. You know, people might suspect that something is going on. Um, but then when you start listening to the lyrics of P. Diddy songs, right? We've heard this all along. We've known, but we just didn't know that this was going on. And I think that, you know, when we start to look back and see the evidence that comes out of more of these high profile cases, that we're going to say, yeah, we actually saw that. Now, hopefully that hindsight and look back will inform our look forward and the choices that we're making, you know, the things that we music that we engage with, the type of culture, right, that we're engaging with that might be glorifying this type of sex trafficking activity. And there's no doubt that there is close overlap, you know, with entertainment and certain um, genres, right, where trafficking is a primary focus. And we've heard this, you know, for a long time, pimp culture, right, and this sort of thing. And then it's like, oh, wait a second, maybe these women aren't doing this by choice. Maybe they didn't want to grow up to be forced into the commercial sex trade, right? So I think that's where it's going to really start to be eye opening, and I think it's going to be harder for human trafficking to hide in the dark with so much awareness that's occurring.
It's so funny you said that because I don't want to get a lawsuit because I certainly can't afford it as a podcast. So one brand that you mentioned for years, their advertising was always that, you know, people would talk about it because it was softcore porn. I mean, to be honest with you, right? With
Right.
teenagers. I mean, so it's right there in front of our face. And so I think that's what we're saying too, is like literally listen to what, you know, watch and see. Um, Another artist who was associated had a lyric that said, woke up at a P. Diddy party. It
Right.
was the like opening line of her song. And she has been very open about some of her struggles. So again, to your point, you know, with again, being very gray, this stuff is right there in front of you. You just got to open your eyes. You have to see what's happening so that we can help others. And so, your book, what is in the book? Do you give people advice like, "Hey, keep your eyes open for this"? Is that in the book? Will they find that there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, the airlines and all of these businesses are providing training to identify um, these victims of human trafficking. And a lot of times, you know, you'll see some of the basic signs are they're not able to speak for themselves. There's kind of a mismatch of the person that they're with. They're not in control of their passports or don't really have freedom of movement. Those are going to be some of the real broad signs that you might see. A lot of first responders are seeing them first, you know, because there's a medical issue or there's a brush with the law, and so helping our first responders understand. But as business owners, every business should have a basic training on identifying human trafficking. If someone to walk into their presence, they would be able to know how to spot it, they would know how to report it, and their employees feel comfortable that they would be able to respond to a human trafficking situation. And so that's kind of the basic level that a business owner or someone in society can be aware and kind of looking out for human trafficking.
And you guys can help with that, right? So they contact you if so. What is your contact information? How do they find you?
Yeah, so darkwatch.io in the contact section there. Someone that wants training, we've trained you know, Fortune 500 companies on identifying this, and in it we go through scenario based training. We look for how organized crime might be operating, and so it's both victim identification and how to protect your business from being exploited by criminals, you know, through better checks. And so that's on our website, darkwatch.io, in the contact section. We can definitely help with that.
And there's hand signals too. Like I've seen, and TikTok's probably another one of those places that you probably highly don't recommend. I would imagine because it's probably a huge trafficking place. But that being said, I have seen, you know, whether it's Instagram or Twitter or on social media, I have seen where a young lady will give a hand signal, right? There's hand signals. There's things that we can look for.
That's right.
And there's also, I've seen some others, and you can tell me if this is true or not, where, someone would walk out to the parking lot and there's something on their car, and they're being watched, so to speak. Is all that, like, this stuff exists, man? Is it all true, or is it conspiracy theory?
It's a mix, it's a mix of both, and that's, we talk about that in the book, like some of the stuff around Pizzagate, which was conspiracy, right? And he got there and kind of realized, hey, this isn't exactly what I thought it was. The problem with that is that it really detracts from sophisticated trafficking that would appear to be a conspiracy if heard. When there was rumblings of the Epstein case, everyone said that's total conspiracy. There's no way that Epstein is running a sex trafficking network, and sure enough, it was. And so that's where, kind of doing your own research and kind of digging in a little deeper, you can quickly usually find the truth. I will say that traffickers are clever, and they are using emotional hooks. They're using social media, and they're using a lot of different methods to try and lure vulnerable individuals in. And it does happen. The actual kidnapping and force side, for sure, and definitely, situational awareness can help with that. Just being aware of your surroundings. But it's kind of more the innocuous methods through social media and love interest, and that we really have to be aware of, because that's the kind of stuff that's slipping by. Everyone's looking for the thing on the car, or that tactic, but they're not necessarily thinking, hey, this stranger that I'm interacting with on social media or a dating site, I may not know them, and they actually might be involved in trafficking in some way.
Man, what you do is so important. So I have to piggyback off that, because I've seen, you mentioned something so early in this interview about, the difference between a drug and a person, right? And so we see these stories about drugs all the time where they'll put drugs in anything, man. Did you see the one last week where a dude put it in his toupee?
No.
Literally, it's not funny. It is funny, but it literally, the guy had a toupee on, and the drugs were up under the toupee, and thankfully, people caught it.
Right.
But literally, that's a drug, and we see it wash up on the shore. Like, you see all these stories about drugs and Netflix stories and everything like that. We have to bring that same awareness and that same, um, you know, laser vision to this too, because, man, these are human beings. That's a drug that, who cares? Like, I mean, I don't mean to say who cares. It's just it's a powder. It's a pill, man. These are human beings, and we have to. Gosh, if I had a choice, I would choose the human being every day and twice on Sunday. Wouldn't you? I know you do.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I think the other thing is that it is the lesser known investigated. It's like we've heard everything about drugs and terror and
Right.
weapons, right?
Right.
But we're not seeing the same resources pour in to fighting sex trafficking until now. Now that these sex traffickers are being thought of as terrorist organizations, and now we're starting to see all these resources pull in. So we say, as a company, we'd love to put ourselves out of business, because we've
Yeah.
done such a good job reversing, and then we'll go solve the next issue, clean water or whatever, right?
Right.
But there needs to be more dark watches. There needs to be more innovators that are out there driving this technology, and there needs to be more of us on the citizen level putting our voices out and saying, hey, not in our backyards, not in our community, and not in our homes.
I've taken so much of your time today. So Dark Watch is the website. One more time. Dark Watch is the company, and that is, what's the website?
Darkwatch.io.
Are you guys on socials or no?
LinkedIn. We do a lot on LinkedIn and Instagram.
Okay. So, and what are those handles? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't know those
All right.
offhand.
Search them. People can find it. Hey, they can find anything. All right. The book is Dark Traffic, and that can be found on all channels, right?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your Christian bookstore distributor. Absolutely.
So this is a question I ask every one of my guests to close an episode. What would you tell your younger self?
Yeah, I would say that for me, it's lean into your faith hard in Jesus and follow his prompting. The direction that God has on our life is maybe cooler and even beyond our wildest dreams, and being sensitive to God's leading in this, and not trying to walk your own path through life is my own personal as part of this.
So let me tell you, I'm so glad your sister, and she is okay today, right?
Yes.
Right? Because the intuition of your father at that moment, but it left a mark on you. And so let me tell you, I'm so glad she's okay.
Yes.
And thank you for those other daughters and sons and adults, as we've talked about today,
Mm-hmm.
that might not be. Thank
Right.
you for your fight for them. And man, that passion, that moment, had to be so scary and traumatic, but because of that, you are doing what you're doing today. And thank you for being on the front lines of something that's, I hope people have listened today and heard how important this is, man. We're talking about human beings here. We're not
Mm-hmm.
talking about a pill or this is so important. And thank you for everything you've done and will do. And for saving even that one child, just that one in that hotel room that day. Thank you, man. I'm honored to have been on with you today.
Likewise. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. We'll talk soon.
All right.
There it is.